Anti-Semitism. Who owns that word? Who defines that word? Now, Muslims, being simply politically naive is the nicest thing I could say about British Muslims, haven't even thought about that. I don't think, well, I put money on it, that not a single Muslim intellectual, speaker, religious scholar, notable person has ever asked this question. And yet I would say that single question is one of the most important questions in the whole of the debate around Palestine, and thus central to a billion Muslims everywhere. The reason why they haven't asked it, obviously, is I don't want to rant on about how pointlessly incompetent they are, but you get the drift. Yeah, they'll tell you about if now varnished is permissible or not, and have a full thesis on it. But anything that's really important to people's lives, they're completely blank on and can't guide the community. But I'm going to talk about this. I want you to pay some attention to it. The obvious answer to that to most people would be, well, Jews, I suppose, if you were going to think about it in that way, if anyone does, I suppose Jews get to define it because anti-Semitism affects them. Yeah, Jews define it. Why? Because it affects Jews. Just like, for example, anti-black racism. Who would define that? Well, you'd say, well, black people should get to define that because they're black, right? It's against them. The answer is obviously, if you think about it rationally, no. Actually, no. Racism is a moral wrong. Yeah? So no group defines it. Morality itself defines it. Yeah? Is racism wrong? The answer is yes or no, depending on morality. Yeah? On your ethics. So black people don't own ethics, do they? Yeah? Jews don't own ethics. Ethics are God-given. Yeah? Intrinsic in mankind. Yeah, so mankind gets to choose what ethics are right and wrong. Is it right to kill a human being? Most mankind would say no. God has instilled in us that this is wrong. Yeah, so ethics define if murder is right or wrong. Some group doesn't define that. Yeah, the victims of murder don't get to define if murder is wrong. Everyone gets to define it because it's wrong no matter if you're a victim or not. So straight away, Jews do not get to define anti-Semitism on that basis. Now, you will hear constantly, and I'll go into this later on, someone will say, you've just said X, Y, Z, that's anti-Semitic. According to who? You don't get to define anti-Semitism. So how do you get to define what is and isn't anti-Semitic? That's a debate that needs to be had, and it hasn't been had, because what we've default given is anti-Semitism directly to Jews. And considering most Jews are Zionists, what you've actually given is given this moral wrong directly to the people who are using it against another people to silence or kill them in Palestine, for example. Now, the second reason why Jews don't get to define it is if we were to argue that, okay, they are the chief victims of anti-Semitism, because it's about Jews, I guess, yeah, then therefore they get to have a large say in it. No, because again, I argue they're not the chief victims of anti-Semitism. Even though anti-Semitism is about prejudice against Jews, Jews have politicized that to such an extent, and don't tell me that that's wrong to say. Whether it's George Galloway, Jeremy Corbyn, Jimmy Carter, an ex-president of America, or the whole Palestinian nation, or the whole Muslim people, we have been tarred with anti-Semitism. Anyone who's ever stood up for the Palestinians has been called an anti-Semite. So we were all victims of that word. We are all victims of that word. So if anti-Semitism is about prejudice against Jews, and only Jews, then it's a collective discussion around that. Anyone has a moral duty to say what is and what isn't anti-Semitism. But since it's been widened to use a political weapon against people who speak up against oppression of another people, Palestinians in this case, then no, everyone becomes a victim of anti-Semitism. Either the slur of anti-Semitism or anti-Semitism against Jews. Yeah. So again, Jews don't define anti-Semitism, neither in a moral sense do they have a right, nor in an actual sense that they are the victims. Palestinians being murdered daily, and the reason why it's carried on for 60 odd years is because of the fear of people being called an anti-Semite. A dead child is lying in its own blood right now because we are scared to be called anti-Semites, and we have been for 60 years. And we haven't asked the tough questions, because every time we do, someone goes, oh, what you did there was anti-Semitic. So can you see, people die off a result of that, therefore we have a stake in it. And this is important, because as soon as someone says that's anti-Semitic, the straight answer is you don't have a right to define anti-Semitism. You have no right to that. The Muslims have equal amount of right as you do. Those who speak up for Palestine have an equal amount of right to define it as you do. You have abused that trust that we have tacitly given you, and now we no longer give that to you. We take that term back and we re-look at it and re-examine it. Yeah? Now let me give you an example. A Palestinian congresswoman recently said to someone, alluded to a senator, I believe, who wanted to ban people who wanted to sack people, imprison people who criticized Israel. And she said, and he claimed that this attack on him was anti-Semitic because it complained that he might have dual loyalty. And listen to this, see how it goes. It's anti-Semitic because you're claiming I have dual loyalty, and that's anti-Semitic because Hitler, for example, may have said that. So effing what? I don't care what Hitler said 100 years ago. We're arguing about now. And so we couldn't even take on a congressperson who has clearly got an interest in Israel and claim he's not thinking solely of America, he's thinking of Israel. Because as soon as you do that, they will silence you and say that's anti-Semitic because of what happened 100 years ago. I don't give a damn about what happened 100 years ago. Palestinians are dying now. And what you're doing to me, to my... and I have a right to challenge that the way I want to, not the way you want me to, or what offends your sensibilities, what makes you happy, yeah? Or what some Jewish Zionists, I'm uncomfortable with. I don't care if you're uncomfortable. Sorry, dude. Palestinians' lives are more important than your comfort. And if your comfort for people in the left who stand up for these, the Jewish left who often silence people. If their comfort is more important than Palestinian lives, get out of the game. You know, we don't accept you as our mouthpiece. We don't accept you as moral arbiters anymore, because you clearly put the lives of the Palestinians as nothing, and the sensitivities of those oppressing them far more. And I don't take that. I don't accept that anymore. And Muslims shouldn't accept that. So so everything that you hear is a kind of web. You can never get out of it. There's no way out of being called anti-Semitic, because it's a political weapon. It's weaponized. Now, when I heard that when someone used this term, it's weaponized. Someone said, "Oh, that's anti-Semitic." Everything's anti-Semitic, mate. You know, breathing's anti-Semitic. Hitler breathed at some point, so therefore it's anti-Semitic. No, you don't define the rules of anti-Semitism. Now, I'm just going to move on here. They don't really care what you and I think, yeah? They're going to use this definition and lobby government secretly so they impose laws. They will get into key positions in pro-Palestinian groups or various universities and whatever, and they will lobby them secretly and say, look, that's our definition of anti-Semitism, therefore accept it. But because there's no counter-narrative challenging that, the people who are hearing this will go, all right, well, that's a fair comment. You're a Jew. You're offended by this. Why should I want to offend you? Therefore, there you go. I accept this definition. And Muslims haven't fought that battle in the West. Why not? You're losing the very battle for Palestine, because you're allowing the most powerful weapon for Israel to go unchecked and unchallenged. The amount of times Muslims have gone silent and said, you know, they don't know how to handle it and they're unsure, is this anti-Semitic? Who decides what's anti-Semitic? How have you given that over to them and then allowed them to abuse us off the back of it and never once challenged them? I mean, surely that's the most ridiculous thing to do. You know, it's shameful that we are so stupid that we've allowed that. And not a single person said, hold on, that I'm not going to accept that. I'm just put a coherent, logical, rational argument on the table. Where's our rational argument? Where's our thinkers? Where's our philosophers? Where's our scholars? I don't need a scholar to tell me is it haram to sit on a leather sofa, because is it killed with the name of God? Was the cow killed in the name of God? I don't care. I need to know about this. This is what scholars should be addressing, real world issues, but they're not. So again, that's what I've got to say on this incendiary, and believe me, what I've said is so powerful. If you only had a bit of sense, it could totally undermine the fight for Israel on the narrative scale, in the minds of people. All you need to do is you need to do two things: put it out to the public and make them consider it. Just put it on the table in your forums, in your discussions, on Twitter, on Facebook, wherever you're arguing this point. Put this counterpoint on the table. Let it start to mull around in people's minds. And secondly, organize yourselves and speak to, you should be lobbying universities, you should be lobbying, institutions, groups and all that, and putting your version, your thinking, Muslim thinking on the table. They may not accept it, but at least it's out there. Right now, you don't even have one. The only active people in England are Muslims, don't talk about, are those who follow the left. Now, I'm not saying the left are bad guys. Actually, most of them are really good guys, but they are petrified of taking on the Israeli lobby, and Jewish sensitivity has always come above Muslim lives. So are you really going to just hand that over to them and have nothing to offer yourself? Give them something. Maybe they'll go, yeah, that's a good idea, we'll take that up from you. Offer something yourself. They've offered stuff and you've considered it. Now you offer some stuff back to them and see what they've got to say about it. Argue your point. Anyway, that's my thought. Have a think about it, and thanks for listening. If you disagree, as I said, more than happy to hear your comments. And maybe I'm wrong, maybe I've got it wrong, and again, a reasoned argument will tell. It's my view. I'm allowed to say it. I won't be silenced by politicized, weaponized smears of anti-Semitism, because the blood of the Palestinians is more important to me than how you feel.